Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. So today, we're going to be looking at something called exit framing and how it can be especially difficult for folks on the autism spectrum. When I was reading this source material, I was really struck by how they compare exit framing to like straight up character assassination.
Yeah, that's a really powerful comparison. It really highlights the serious consequences of this whole practice, especially for autistic individuals,
Hmm.
who may already be facing unique challenges in the workplace as is.
Right, yeah, absolutely. So let's break this down a bit, for our listener. What exactly are we talking about here when we say exit framing?
Well, essentially, it's when an employer kind of twists the story of why someone left a job to protect, the company's image instead of acknowledging, the legitimate reasons for leaving, like maybe a toxic work environment or something. They'll spin a tale that makes the employee look bad.
Okay, so like just to give our listener a really concrete example of this. Imagine you leave a job because your boss is just an absolute nightmare. But instead of admitting that the company tells everyone you were unmotivated or that you couldn't handle the workload, or they might even go as far as to say that you lacked the necessary skills, even if you were like excelling in your role.
Exactly. And it's not even just about saving face. This is about protecting the company from like potential legal issues or reputational damage. But, the impact on the employee can be just devastating.
Especially for someone on the autism spectrum.
Hmm.
I mean, we know that autistic individuals often have, different ways of communicating
Yeah.
or interacting socially.
Right. And those differences can be so easily misinterpreted in a work setting.
Hmm.
For instance, an autistic employee's direct communication style
Yeah.
might be perceived as rude or confrontational, or, their adherence to certain routines could be seen as inflexibility.
And then when it comes to exit framing, like those misinterpretations
Yeah.
almost get weaponized, right? So instead of recognizing that maybe the work environment was the problem, they use the employee's autism as a scapegoat.
Unfortunately, yeah. The source actually gives a pretty chilling example where an autistic employee's meticulous note-taking, which was actually, a strength for them, was twisted into this whole narrative about them being obsessive and unable to like let go of
Oh,
details.
that's awful. And I bet it's got to be so hard to fight back against that kind of spin,
Yeah.
especially when you consider the power dynamics at play?
It is, and this is where that whole character assassination aspect really comes in, because that manufactured narrative can spread,
Yeah.
and it can make it incredibly difficult for that employee to find new work, even if the accusations are completely false.
Yeah, the source suggests that employers might even use coded language
Hmm.
in their references,
Oh,
like
yeah.
saying that someone is not a good fit, without giving any specific reasons, which is a lot of room for speculation, harmful speculation.
Right. And for an autistic person who might already struggle with social cues, as you know, it can be incredibly difficult to decipher that coded language and defend themselves against those kind of veiled accusations.
It's almost like they're setting you up to fail in a way, like they're creating this self-fulfilling prophecy where you're labeled as difficult and then treated as such, even in new work environments.
Yeah, that's a really insightful observation. And it really speaks to the insidious nature of this practice. It's not just about what's said explicitly, it's about the subtle ways in which those narratives can shape perceptions and limit opportunities.
So for our listener, what we're talking about here is way more than just a bad reference. We're talking about the potential for long-term damage
Yeah,
to someone's career and their reputation.
absolutely. And that's why it's so important to understand how exit framing works and what steps you can take to protect yourself.
Well, you've definitely got our listeners' attention now. This is getting pretty intense. So what can someone actually do to fight back against this?
Well, one of the most important things, according to the source, is documentation, keeping records of everything, performance reviews, emails, notes from meetings, anything that can help you build a case, and counter those false narratives.
So if an employer tries to twist the story later, you have concrete evidence to present your side of things.
Precisely. It's like having receipts, to prove your case. But the source also acknowledges that documentation isn't always enough, especially if the workplace culture is like deeply toxic.
Right. It's not always safe or even possible to speak up while you're still employed.
Yeah, that's why the source also emphasizes the importance of building a strong support system outside of work. Mentors, career coaches, therapists, having people that you can trust to help you process your experiences and navigate those really challenging situations
Hmm.
can be just invaluable.
It's like having a team in your corner,
Mm-hmm.
advocating for you when you might not be able to advocate for yourself. And on that note, for our listener, we're going to pause here and pick up with this support network idea. Hey, part two. This is some heavy stuff. But remember, knowledge is power. and we're here to help you understand this complex issue
Mm-hmm.
and equip you with strategies to move forward.
Yeah, building that support network is really key. And it's something that really resonated with me personally, when I was reading about the emotional toll that exit framing can take, especially for, those on the autism spectrum. It made me think about all the times I felt like misunderstood or misrepresented in like professional settings.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly isolating.
Yeah, I hear that. And the source really drives home that point about isolation. They talk about how exit framing can be particularly damaging for autistic individuals who might already be struggling with social anxiety
Mm-hmm.
or have experienced bullying, in the past. It's like all those past traumas get reactivated and amplified.
Exactly. And that's why having people you can trust to like validate your experiences and offer emotional support is just so crucial. It can make a huge difference in terms of processing those difficult emotions and building resilience.
So for our listener, think about those people in your life who
Mhm.
really genuinely get you. Friends, family members, maybe even like a therapist or a career counselor who specializes in neurodiversity. These are the folks who can offer a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on,
Hmm.
and maybe even some like practical advice on how to move forward.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the power of connecting with other autistic individuals. Online forums, support groups, even social media can provide a sense of community and shared understanding. And knowing that you're not alone in this can be incredibly empowering.
That's so true. The source actually mentions a study that found that autistic individuals who had strong social support networks were significantly less likely to experience like negative mental health outcomes after experiencing workplace discrimination. That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is, and it really underscores the importance of community and connection, especially in the face of adversity. It's about creating a buffer against those negative experiences and building a sense of belonging.
Okay, so we've talked about documentation, we've talked about building a support system, but what about like actually confronting the exit framing head on? Is that ever a good idea?
Well, that's a tricky one. The source suggests that speaking up can be effective in some cases, especially if you have, clear documentation to support your claims. But it's also important to consider the potential risks.
Sorry, because like if the workplace was truly toxic
Mm.
or there's a history of retaliation, speaking up might not be the safest option.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that you don't have to put yourself in a vulnerable position. You always have the right to prioritize your own safety and well-being.
So for our listener, if you're considering confronting the exit framing, it's crucial to weigh those potential benefits against the risks. And maybe even talk it through with someone you trust, like a therapist, a mentor, someone who can help you assess the situation and make an informed decision.
And if you do decide to speak up, the source recommends doing so in a calm and factual manner. Focus on presenting the evidence and avoid getting drawn into like emotional arguments.
It's like stick to the facts, keep it professional, and have your documentation ready to go.
Precisely. And it's also a good idea to document the conversation itself. Send a follow-up email summarizing the key points and any agreements that were made.
It's almost like creating a paper trail to protect yourself in case the situation escalates.
Right. And this is especially important for autistic individuals who might find it challenging to navigate,
Yeah.
those complex social dynamics or assert themselves in confrontational situations. Having that documentation can provide a sense of control and security.
Okay, so we've covered documentation, support systems, and even confronting the exit framing directly. But let's be real sometimes. Even with all of those strategies in place, the damage is already done. So what happens when that negative narrative takes hold and you're struggling to find new work?
Well, that's where the source's advice on reclaiming your narrative comes in. It's about taking proactive steps to counter those false perceptions and showcase your skills and abilities.
So instead of letting the exit framing define you, you take control of the story.
Exactly. And this can involve a variety of strategies, from updating your resume and online profiles to actively networking and seeking out opportunities that align with your strengths.
And for our listener, this is a good point to shift our focus to those specific strategies. We're going to pause here and dive deeper into how to reclaim your narrative in part 3. Okay, so we've talked about all the heavy stuff, like what exit framing is, why it can be especially harmful for autistic folks, and the toll it can take. But I think it's time to shift gears a little bit and get into some more proactive steps, because our listeners are probably wondering, like, okay, what can I do about this?
Yeah, and that's where I think the source material really shines. It goes beyond just explaining the problem and offers some really concrete ways to reclaim your narrative, even if you've been through, a rough exit framing experience.
Okay, so like for our listener,
Hmm.
let's say you've left a job where you felt misunderstood or even mistreated, and you're worried about how that might affect your future job prospects. Where do you even begin to rebuild from that?
Well, the first step, honestly, is acknowledging what happened. Don't try to minimize or dismiss your experience. It's important to validate your own feelings and recognize that you were in a difficult situation.
Yeah, I think that's so important because it's easy to get caught up in self-blame, especially if the employer was really good at spinning that narrative. But it's crucial to remember that you're not the problem.
Exactly. And once you've kind of acknowledged what happened, you can start to focus on taking back control. That might mean updating your resume and your LinkedIn profile to highlight your skills and accomplishments in a way that counters that negative narrative.
So like, for example, if the employer framed you as inflexible, maybe you highlight projects where you demonstrated adaptability or
E-
problem-solving skills.
Exactly. It's about reframing the narrative
Yeah.
and showcasing your strengths. And it's not just about tweaking your resume. Networking is also crucial. You know, connect with people in your field, attend industry events, and build relationships with those who can vouch for your abilities and your character.
The source also emphasizes the importance of finding supportive allies. These could be mentors, career coaches, or even therapists who specialize in neurodiversity.
Yeah, having people who understand the challenges you face and can offer guidance and encouragement can make a world of difference. And don't underestimate the power of peer support.
Yeah, connecting with other autistic individuals who've been through similar experiences can be so validating. It's a reminder that you're not alone and that there are people out there who get it, you know?
Absolutely. And those connections can lead to valuable resources, advice, and even job opportunities.
Yeah, the source mentions a few online communities, specifically for autistic professionals, where people share job leads, offer support, and celebrate each other's successes. I'll make sure to include links to those in the show notes for our listener.
That's a great idea. And remember, reclaiming your narrative is an ongoing process. It takes time, effort, and a whole lot of self-compassion.
It's not about erasing what happened. It's about learning from it, building resilience, and moving forward with confidence.
And for our listener, I think one of the most powerful takeaways from this whole deep dive is that you have the power to define your own success. Don't let a negative experience or someone else's narrative limit your potential.
You are capable, you are valuable, and you deserve to thrive in a workplace that appreciates your unique skills and talents.
And remember, even in the face of adversity, there's always hope. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep advocating for yourself. You got this.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into exit framing. It's been a challenging topic, but I hope we've provided our listener with some valuable insights and tools to navigate this complex issue. And if you're out there listening and you've been through something similar, know that you're not alone. Reach out to your support network, connect with other autistic professionals, and keep fighting for your right to a fair and equitable workplace.